in the name of Tommy Broughan. 30 seconds.
Thanks, Lascan. Well, I know the Minister is very familiar with the rare genetic disease phenylketonuria, where patients have difficulty processing the amino acid phenylalanine, and therefore must live on very restricted, low-protein diets. Now, I know we've had the report from the National Centre for Pharmacoeconomics. The HSE, I believe, was considering. We've had 2 recommendations against the sapropterin dihydrochloride, the Kuvan drug, in the last 9 years. So I just wanted to ask you, there was a meeting to be held, I think, Minister, with the relevant drug company it was scheduled before the storm of Ophelia. So has a meeting happened, and has information from the meeting been forwarded to the HSE drugs group? And when will we get approval for this drug?
Minister.
I want to thank Deputy Broughan for raising this issue. As the Deputy knows and outlines in his contribution, the HSE has statutory responsibility for decisions on pricing and reimbursement of medicines under the Community Drug Scheme, under powers that this House gave to the HSE under the Health Pricing and Supply of Medical Goods Act of 2013. In reaching a decision, the HSE obviously examines all of the evidence which may be relevant in its view for the decision, and will take into account such expert opinions and recommendations which it has sought, including, for example, advice from the National Centre for Pharmacoeconomics. Kuvan was considered under the national pricing and reimbursement process in 2009, and at the time insufficient evidence was available to support the pricing and reimbursement application submitted. In 2016, the HSE was advised that a new health technology assessment dossier would be submitted on the drug. The NCP completed its assessment of the new dossier in September of this year, and it did not recommend the drug for reimbursement as it was not deemed to be cost-effective at the price sought by the company. And I'd highlight that line. The HSE assessment process is ongoing, and the HSE will take into account any relevant expert advice when making its decision. And in terms of the question the Deputy asked, I've been assured by the HSE that commercial discussions are ongoing. I can't answer honestly your question as to whether the meeting is taking place. I don't know, but I'm told that commercial discussions are ongoing. And I'm also told that the HSE has also now received additional submissions from patient groups, I think actually via a member of this House, which will be considered as part of the process. So both the commercial negotiations and the consideration of the patient submissions will take place before the drugs group will finally review the matter and make a decision to the HSE leadership. If I can also say, though, I have heard parents campaigning for this drug make what I think is a very valid point, and it's their concern that the system we have in place for assessing drugs for rare diseases is not adequate. And I do want to inform the Deputy, and I may run out of time, a new committee called the Rare Diseases Medicinal Products Technology Review Committee has been established by the NCPE. The terms of reference for this committee have been finalised, and the responsibilities of it include the review of proposals for funding of new products for rare diseases or expanded indications for existing products for rare diseases. Will also contribute to the development of clinical guidelines, because I think there is a valid point. We actually have quite a good assessment process, I think, but when it comes to rare diseas, I've heard parents argue that there needs to be a better look, and this committee will take a look. That's in addition and separate to the assessment process.
Thanks, Lascan. Well, I welcome the comments in relation. I think you're talking about the quality of life criteria in relation to all the rare diseases. And I mean, just looking again at the National Centre for Pharmacoeconomics report, it does seem clear that, I mean, on clinical grounds, there's a huge, I think, basically positive approach from that report. As you say, it seems to come down to the costing, the economics, and the difficulty of measuring costings when it's a very small cohort. But like yourself, obviously, I'm very, very familiar with this disease and with the needs of families. My own family is one of those concerned in relation to PKU. I think the Minister will be familiar also from listening to the PKU Association and from various families that the ongoing daily struggle of trying to live on a very low protein diet and the fact that there's a very limited low protein diet available in this country. As you know, it's a very small cohort of our citizens, 1 in 4,500 babies, I think 20 referrals to the National Centre for Inherited Metabolic Disorders at Temple Street every year. But it does seem that for many parents and most deputies will have received very valuable information from the PKU Association. Many parents have outlined their daily struggle and, in fact, the kind of the greater freedom in having, if you like, access to a wider protein diet would have if Kuvan was to be authorised. So I know the Minister is sympathetic, but we need to act soon, Minister. Thanks.
Minister, is 1 minute.
I want to thank the Deputy. I must say I find myself in agreement with pretty much everything you've said, and I have heard very clearly from the PKU Association that whilst they're absolutely campaigning, as would any of us, for a loved one to have access to this drug, they're making the broader point as well about the quality and the assessment process for rare diseases needing a look at. And I want to assure the House that process is underway with a new working group of the NCP in that regard. I also want to assure people today wondering about the availability of Kuvan, as I did in my initial answer to Deputy Broughan, that this process has not ended. That the HSE informs me that commercial negotiations are ongoing and that they're also considering information they have received from patient groups, presumably including the PKU Association. I would make the point that obviously when it comes to drug negotiations, pressure is rightly put on me and the HSE. It's important that in a negotiation, companies negotiate as well in the interests of patients in terms of a fair price for this country too. And in relation to PKU, I would make the point also, you're right, it's an extraordinarily challenging condition, as you probably know better than I. We have recently expanded the list of products available to PKU patients and citizens through our pharmacy, and we need to do more in that regard too. So I will keep the Deputy informed on the process.
Final supplementary.
Thanks, Gerla. Well, and just to say to the Minister, obviously the report, the actual costing in the report for 100% take-up, it does seem relatively tiny. It's a lot of money, a relatively tiny amount though in the health budget, 12.7 million over 5 years, €2.5 million a year. It's also striking that the European Society for PKU, which is strongly supported, the PKU Society of Ireland, they make the basic point that the EU regulatory agencies approved the drug in 2009 for use, I think, in 20 European countries at the time. So a whole range of our EU partners, France, Germany, Austria, Bulgaria, Romania, all across the continent, and indeed the United States also, there is access for parents with children with PKU, but because it is obviously a genetic aspect of our community in particular, it would seem that's extraordinary that Ireland is the one country where this particular medicine isn't available. It's particularly potentially life-changing, I think, for all of those 800 individuals and for all their families. So it is something, and again, I know the Minister is sympathetic, and I know you have many of the advocates for rare diseases putting forward the case, but I think in this particular instance also, and I would support those as well, but in this instance I think it should be approved. Thanks, Gerard.
Well, obviously, just for me to be very factual, in terms of the decision to approve or not approve, it is obviously a matter for the HSE leadership team. They'll hear from the drugs group. That's obviously under the legislation passed by this House. But I think there has been maybe a view out there that the process has kind of come to an end and that's it. The NCP has absolutely made its views known. They're a matter of public record, but commercial negotiations are ongoing. And I've stood in this House quite a few times in my a year and a half as Health Minister, where there have been drugs that our patients have been seeking. It looked like it's been extraordinarily difficult to obtain them, and through negotiations we have managed to make drugs available. I hope we'll continue to make new and innovative medicines available. On the international piece, I think the Deputy raises an issue which I've been working quite hard on in terms of we are a very small country. Whilst we do have, you're right, comparatively in terms of the incidences of PKU, I think it's important that we internationally collaborate, that we share information with other countries on challenges we're experiencing, that we cooperate, that we jointly horizon scan, and I hope in the coming weeks to be able to make an announcement about how Ireland can formalise its involvement in working with other countries in terms of trying to get better access to new and innovative medicines and better value at the same time.
Thank you, Minister. We'll move on now to